I can assure you of this. If I find a friendlier, more welcoming, and kinder set of people in all America than the Down East Manners, I will send you a film of me eating my hat. New England and the East Coast, Maine, abbreviation ME, nickname, the Pine Tree State, capital, Augusta, flower, white pine cone, tree, eastern white pine, bird, black-capped chickadee. Motto, Dirigo, I lead. Well-known residents and natives, Edward Muskie, Dorothea Dix, Winslow Homer, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Edna St. Vincent Millay, Artemis Ward, E.B. White, Stephen King, John Ford, Patrick Dempsey, Jonathan Frakes, Liv Tyler, Judd Nelson. Squeezed by Canada on two sides and connected to the rest of America by a straight-line border with New Hampshire, Maine is home to 1.25 million citizens who roam roamily around a land larger than all of Scotland. The southeast half of the state is where the urban action is. Portland and Bangor are the big towns. The former is the birthplace of hometown of Stephen King, the Nobel laureate of Maine, whose prolific output has stayed loyal to the state for over 30 years. But I'm heading north, passing through Portland, Augusta, and Bangor, getting used to how much of a head turner my little London taxi will be. Augusta, with one of the lowest population of any of the 50 states' capitals, seems small, depressed, and depressing. I hurry through on my way down east. Down in Maine speak means up. With the exception of Louisiana and Alaska, whose administrative districts are called parishes and boroughs, respectively, all the American states are divided into counties. These are much like their British counterparts, but with sheriffs who are really live law enforcement officers rather than our ceremonial figureheads in silly costumes. Every U.S. county has its chief town and administrative headquarters, known as the county seat. The number of counties in each state will vary. Florida, for example, has 67, Nebraska 93, and Texas 254. Maine has just 16, and at the top right of this rightmost state, you will find Washington County, the easternmost county in all America. My destination is Eastport, the easternmost town and the easternmost county. Down East. The most obvious physical features of the Down East scenery are forest and ocean. But then this is true of the whole state. Manners will tell you that if you were to straighten every wrinkle and crinkle of their coastline, it would stretch out wider than the whole breadth of the United States into 3,500 miles of inlets, creeks, coves, bays, promontories, spits, sounds, and headlands. As for the land, well, there is only 10% of Maine that is not forest, and much of that is lake and river. Water and wood, then, water and wood everywhere. They will also tell you that Eastport was once famed for its sardine packing industry. Fame is an odd thing in America. There cannot be many towns with a population of more than 10,000 that do not make some claim to it. It usually comes in the form of a burger, short for hamburger. Thanksville, NC, home of the world-famous Snacky Burger, a dish that will never have been heard of more than 5 miles from its originating diner. But back in the day, Eastport genuinely was famous for sardines. An industry that, if the Eastporters are to be believed, was effectively wrecked by the most trust man in America, the doing of news anchor Walter, and that is the way it is, Cronkite, liked apparently to sail in the waters around Eastport and was disturbed one day to see a film of oil all over the water, staining the trim paintwork on his yacht. He made complaints. A government agency looked at the fish oil coming from the cannery and imposed regulations so strict the economic viability of the business was compromised and the industry left its port for good. That at least is the story I was told as gospel by many Eastporters. Certainly the deserted shells of the old canneries still brood over the harbor awaiting their full regeneration. The body of water that dominates the harbor is Passamaquoddy Bay, and the land on the other side is confusingly Canada. A line straight down the middle of the bay forms the border between the two countries. Before the British, before the French, before any Europeans came to Maine, there were the tribesmen, the First Nations or Native Americans, as I expected I should have to be very careful to call them. Actually, the word Indian seems inoffensive to the tribespeople I speak to around town. The federal agency is still called the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and there are Indian creeks and Indian roads and Indian rivers everywhere. It is true that the word was wrongly applied to the native tribes by Columbus and his settlers who thought they had landed in India. But the word stuck, misnomer or not. Sometimes political correctness exists more in the furious mind of its enemies than in reality, which gets on with compromise and common sense without too much hysteria. Anyway, the indigenous people of the Maine, New Brunswick area are the Passamaquoddy, a European mangling of the original name, which mean something like the people who live quite close to Pollock and spare them a lot from small boats. Which maybe not be a snappy title for a tribe, but can hardly be faulted as a piece of self-description. My first full day in Eastport will see me on Passamaquoddy Bay, not sparing Pollock, but hunting a local delicacy prized around the world. Lobstering. The word Maine goes before the word lobster, much as Florida goes before orange juice, Idaho before potato, and Tennessee before Williams. 3 out of 4 lobsters eaten in America, so am I told, are caught in Maine waters. There are crab and scallop and innumerable other mollusks and crustaceans making a living in the cold Atlantic waters. But the real prize has always been lobster. Angus MacPhail has been lobstering all his life. He and his sons, Charlie and Jesse, agreed to take me on board for a morning. So long as I do my share of work. I'm in television. You come aboard, you work. You can help empty and bathe the pots. The pots are actually traps. Crates filled with a tempting bag of stinky bait for lobsters are aggressive predators of the deep and will not be lured by bright colors or attractively arranged slices of tropical fruit. They have a cunning arrangement of hysteria hinged doors designed to imprison any lobster that strays in. These cages are laid down in long connected lines on the American side of the border. Angus, skipper on the boat, has all the latest sat-nav technology to allow him to mark with an X on his screen exactly where the lures have been set. To help the boys on the deck, a buoy marked with the name of the vessel flow on the surface above each pot. Americans, as you may know, pronounce buoy to rhyme not with joy but with buoy. How is it that work clothes know when they are being worn by an amateur, a dilettante and interloper? wear exactly the same aprons and boots and gloves as Charlie and Jessie. They look like fishermen. I look like types of goneless arse. Hey ho! I had better get used to this ineluctable fact, for it will chase me across America. It is extraordinarily hard work. For a moment we reach a trap. The boys are hooking the line and hauling in the pot. In the meantime, I have been stuffing the bait nets with hideously rotted fish, which I am told are in fact sardines. The pot arrives on deck, and instantly I must pull the lobsters from each trap and drop them on the great sorting table that forms much of the forward part of the deck. There are good-looking crabs in the traps. They can join the party too. Less appetizing specimens and species are thrown back into the ocean. Lobster, of course, are mean, aggressive animals. But who can blame them for wanting a piece of my hand? They're fighting for their lives. Equipped with homegrown cutlery expressly designed to snip off bites of enemy, they don't take my handling without a fight. As soon as the trap has been emptied, I am at the table sorting. This sorting is important. Livelihoods are at stake. The main lobstermen and marine authorities are determined not to allow overfishing to deplete their waters, and there is fierce legislation in place to protect the stocks. Jesse explains, if it's too small, it goes back in. Use these to measure. He hands me a complicated doodad that is something between a calibrated nutcracker and an adjustable spanner. And the undersized lobsters, they gotta to go back in the water, okay? Don't they taste as good? A look somewhere between pity and contempt meets this idiotic remark. They won't be full grown, see? Gotta let them breed first. Keep the stocks up. Oh, yes, of course. Dear, sorry. I always feel a fool when in the company of people who work for a living. It brings out my startling lack of common sense. If you find a female in egg, notch her tail with these pliers and throw her back in too. An egg? How do I? You'll know. How right he was. A pregnant lobster is impossible to miss. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of glittering black beads stuck all around her body like an over-fertile bramble hedge thick with blackberries. Notch her tail is one of things that takes a second to say and 3.5 minutes of thrashing, wrestling, and swearing to accomplish. The blend of curiosity, amusement, and disbelief with which I am watched by Jessie and Charlie only makes me feel hotter and clumsier. Is this strictly necessary? The inspectors find any legal lobsters in our case, they'll fine us more than we can afford. They'll even take the boat. How cruel! Just doing their job. I went to school with most of them. Go out hunting in the woods with them weekends. That wouldn't stop them closing us down if they had to. Done it. I hold up one properly notched pregnant female. Jessie takes a look and nods, and I throw her back into the ocean. Good. Now you gotta band the keepers. I've got to what the witch? The mature, full-size, non-pregnant lobsters the crew don't have to throw back are called keepers, and it seems that a rubber band must be pulled over their claws, and that I am the man to do it. Charlie hands me the device with which one of supposed to pick up a band, stretch it and get it round the lobster's formidable thick weaponry in one swift movement. Charlie demonstrates beautifully. This implement, however, marks me down as an amateur as soon as I attempt to pick it up, and in a short while I am sending elastic bands flying around the deck like a schoolboy at the back of the bus. Otherwise they'll injure each other, explains Charlie. Yes, fine. Of course. Whereas this way they only injure me. I see them injustice in that. I try again. Ouch, I mean quite seriously, ouch. It transpires that lobsters, if they had their way, would prefer not to have elastic bands limiting their pinces, reach, range, and movement, and they are quite prepared to make a fuss about it. The whole operation of sorting and bending is harder than trying to shove a pound of melting butter into a wildcat's left ear with a red-hot needle in a darkened room, as someone said about something. And what really gets me into that just as I finish sorting and am ready to turn my mind to a nice cup of tea and reminisce about our famous victory over the lobsters, Charlie and Jesse send down a fresh pot. Angus moves the boat on, and another trap is being pulled aboard. You mean one has to do more than one of these? I gasp. We make about 30 drafts a day. A draft being the pulling up, emptying, and rebaiting of a trap. Oh my, this is hard work. Gruelingly hard work. The morning we make our run is a fine sparkling one, with only the mildest of swells. The mackerels go out in all weathers and almost all seas. You have probably seen TV chefs like Rick Stein spend the day with fishermen and pay testament to their bravery and fortitude. We can all admire the bold hunters of the deep, especially these artisanal rather than industrial fishers like the mackerels, crewing their small craft and husbanding the stocks with respect, skill, and sensitivity. But until you have joined them, even for one morning, it is hard truly to appreciate toil, skill, hardiness, and uncomplaining courage of these men. And yes, it is exclusively men who go out to sea in fishing boats. They do it for one reason and one reason only: their families. They have wives and children, and they need to support them. There are not many jobs going in down East Main, not much in the way of industry, no sign of Starbucks, malls, and service sector employment. This is work on the 19th century model. This is labor. Given how hard their days are, you might think they end each night in dark in bars drinking themselves silly. Actually, they need to be home in time for a bath and bed, for the next morning they will be up again at 4. It is perhaps unsurprisingly to hear Jesse tell me that he wants his own sons to do any work other than this. Maybe we should prepare for the price of lobster to go up in our restaurants and fishmongers. Whatever these men make is surely isn't enough. From the sea to the table, lobsters, it seems to me, are simply giant marine insects. Huge bugs in creepy armor. Look at a woodlouse, and then at lobster. Cousins, surely. And look at the flesh of a lobster, and then at a maggot. Exactly. Cover them in mayonnaise and Frenchify them all you will. Lobsters are insects. Scary, scuttling insects. None of which stops them from tasting the mothering delicious, of course. And it's with lip-smacking anticipation that I jump off Angus lobsterman and prepare to feast on our catch at Bob del Papa's chowder house right on the quayside. Bob del Papa is, well, is as his name leads us to hope he might be big, amiable, powerful-looking, and hospitable. He came up from Rhode Island many years ago, having served his country and learned his seamanship with the United States Coast Guard. There doesn't seem to be much in Eastport that Bob doesn't own, including lobsters themselves. He buys them from the fishermen and sells them on to whoever then gets them finally to the restaurant kitchen of America. Bob is far from your typical desk and chair entrepreneur, however. He drives the forklift, hauls the crates, cooks the food, and sweeps the yard. He is very determined that I should enjoy a Maine lobster properly served with all the correct accoutrements and habiliments traditionally associated with a Maine lobster dinner, and takes great pleasure in preparing a grand feast. Wades right out on the dockside. A big pot is hauled onto a gas ring, and a long trestle table laid against the wall and under a canopy to protect it from the rain that is beginning to fall. Bad weather instantly sends the British inside, but in Maine they seem to be made of hardier stuff. An al fresco banquet was prepared, and al fresco banquet we shall all have. One by one, Bob's friends and neighbors start to arrive. Everyone is grinning and rubbing their hands with pleasurable anticipation. Before tossing each lobster to his boiling fate, it is possible to hypnotize them, or at least send them into a strange cataleptic trance. Bob teaches me how to place one upright on a table and firmly stroke the back of its neck. After a surprisingly short while, it freezes and stays there immobile. It is to be hoped that this state will deprive it of even a milliseconds of scalding agony when finally into the pot it falls. While dozens of them boil away in the cauldron for 9 or 10 minutes, turning from browny blue coral to bright cardinal red, I sit myself down and allow Bob's staff of smiling waitresses to serve the first course. We start with cups of clam chowder, the celebrated New England soup of cream, potatoes, onions, bacon, fish, stock, and carhawks. This last now made immortal in the name of the hometown and Family Guy, are Atlantic hard-shelled clams, a little larger than the cherrystone or little neck clams, which also abound in these fruitful waters. From Maine to Massachusetts, a cup of chowder is traditionally served with oyster crackers, small saltine-style biscuits crumbled into the soup to thicken it further. A little white pepper makes the whole experience even more toothsome. But don't even think of adding tomato. This is actually illegal in Maine thanks to a piece of 1939 legislation specifically outlawing the practice. It may be good enough for Manhattan chowder, which I am told is no more than Italian clam soup rebranded, but the real New England deal must be creamy, white, and tomato-free. Like so many enduring local dishes, chowder has an especial greatness when consumed in its land of origin. We all know how delicious Retsina is sipped on a Greek island, and yet how duff it tastes back home. Well, I don't think clam chowder is ever duff. But eaten on a quayside in Down East Maine, even the driving rain, it is to my mind and stomach as close to perfect as any dish can be. Until the lobster arrives, that is. Each of us is given a pair of crackers, a lot of coleslaw, a bib, a tube of melted and clarified butter, and great red lobster. I recognized mine as the one who gave me an especially painful nip early in the day, so it is with regrettable but understandable savagery that I tear him into pieces, dipping his maggot flesh with frenzied delight into the ghee and fully justifying the bib, which I notice I am the only one wearing. Bob del Papa claps me on the shoulder. Don't get much better, and this does it? I take another sip of the supernacular wine and swallow another piece of the sensational blueberry pie that Bob himself baked. The late afternoon sun pushes through the clouds on its way down west, where all the rest of America lies. No, Bob, it doesn't. It truly doesn't. But I was wrong. Left, right, center. That night, Bob takes me to the Happy Crab, a magnificent eatery run by two expat Britons from Leicester. where he initiates me into left, right, center, and American spelling of centuries, one feels obligatory. A dice game of startling simplicity and fun. He even gives me a set of dice. I plan to make it the latest gaming sensation in London. It was inexpressibly touching to discover how much the Manors want me to love their state, an easy wish to grant. At one point, Bob even speculates on which states I might refer, as if this grand tour was a competition. I'm worried about Montana, very beautiful, nice people. Hell, if it had a coastline, I might even live there myself. Yep, I'm worried you might like Montana more than Maine. But you think we'll be in the top 10? I do not laugh, for I see how seriously the issue concerns him. There are no top 10s, I say, but I can assure you of this. If I find a friendlier, more welcoming, and kinder set of people in all America than the Down East Manors, I will send you a film of me eating my hat.